Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am O'Brien McMahon, and this is People Business. In this episode, I'm joined by Casey Jacox. Casey is the founder of Winning the Relationship, LLC, a consulting firm providing executive sales leadership and coaching. Additionally, Casey hosts the Quarterback DadCast podcast that offers stories, advice, and wisdom for fathers looking to improve their relationship skills, their leadership skills, and their emotional intelligence. I had the pleasure of being on Casey's show and invited him on to talk about his expertise, in particular, the name of his company and the name of his book, Winning the Relationship, Not the Deal. And while sales is not a topic that everybody is interested in, the skills that it takes to be a salesperson, building relationships essentially, is a skill that is relevant to everybody. And so whether you're a salesperson or not, there is a ton of great stuff in here, a ton of great actual tactical questions you can be asking, frameworks you can use. There's a ton of stuff you can pull from this and just start practicing and using in your real life that will help you open other people up, develop better relationships, and really create more meaningful relationships in your life. So very excited to share this with you all. Here is Casey Jacox. Casey, welcome to the show. Excited to finish the second leg of our match. You were kind enough to invite me on your show, and we recorded that a couple weeks ago. And now here we are to pick your brain this time. Glad to have you. Welcome.
I'm honored, and we got to give love to Megan McCann. Without Megan, we could cue the music, reunited, and it feels so good. It doesn't happen. So Megan, thank you for introducing me to the fantastic O'Brien.
Absolutely. You never know where good relationships are going to come from. I was sitting next to Megan at an event that we both got invited to by a third party, wound up chatting it up, and I mentioned what I was doing. And she said, I work with this gentleman who you should meet. He's fantastic. And she introduced us. And so here we are. Want to kick this thing off just right at the beginning. Let's set the table a little bit. Who are you and what do you do?
I am, hard to believe, I'm almost 50, which sounds really weird to say, but I'm 50 is the new 20, O'Brien. Trying to keep it young. And I'm trying to accomplish my fitness goals where don't get fat, don't get hurt. But who am I? I'm a dad of two great kids. I have a senior in high school who's going down the journey of college selection process. We're going to be on a visit next week. He's hoping to play golf in college, which has been so fun. I have a sophomore daughter, basketball player, scrappy, toughest one in our family. Actually, proud dad moment. She had this push-up contest for her varsity team. She started this full fall training. She did 35 push-ups in a row without breaking. Then they redid the test. She did 62.
Whoa.
I'm like, damn, girl, they do steroid check? You're on roids?
Yeah.
But she laughed. But she's
great.
Super proud. Married to my amazing wife, Carrie. We've actually been dating since seventh grade. We'll celebrate 25 years in February. I was a corporate guy for 20 years, former college quarterback, Uncle Rico moment right there. And now I'm an author. I'm a coach, and I absolutely love what I'm doing. So that's really who I am.
What kind of coaching are you doing? Because coaching can take a lot of different flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you get to be doing that kind of coaching?
Great question. So I did not plan on coaching, becoming a coach. I worked, when I left corporate, I wrote a book, started a podcast, and then coaching found me. And it happened one day where I started having these conversations with people and someone said, I'm looking for a coach. And I didn't even think, why not me? Because the story I was telling myself, O'Brien, was I'm not certified. I didn't go to coaching school. That's not for me. And there was a gentleman I talked to, shout out to Andrew Moss in Toronto. I remember calling him one day. I met him during my journey of 2020 networking. And I said, hey, Andrew, I really could use your advice on, I think I'm missing out on these coaching opportunities, but I'm not certified. What do you think I should do? And he looks down, this is on Zoom. And he goes, can I be honest with you? I said, yeah. That's why I called you. He goes, I don't know if you can take it. I said, listen, dude, I've thrown 4 interceptions in the first half. I've been booed in stadiums. I've been part of one of the biggest deals in my company history. I've been boardrooms, earnings calls. I can take it. He's like, okay. So I heard about you, Casey. You've achieved A, B, and C. You've done X, Y, and Z. I go, yeah. He goes, then I want you to get out of my mother effing face and stop wasting my mother effing time on Zoom. I was like, what? My eyes got big, and he holds up a copy of my book. He goes, hey, dumbass, here's your certification. Get out of my face. I was like, oh my God, thank you. And I felt like I was a 10-year-old boy that got in trouble at recess and I had to scurry back to the classroom. And I picked up the phone. I called Leslie, CEO, back. I said, Leslie, hey, I know it's Case. She goes, I know. I go, are you still looking for a coach? Yeah, I just told you that 3 minutes ago. I'm like, I think I found him. Can I tell you about him? And I described myself in third person. She's like, holy shit, who is it? I go, it's me. When do I start? She's like, what? I go, I know. Trust me. I think I'm your guy. And after 3 months, if I've not helped, actually Megan was I'm actually not Megan. Megan was the second client I had, but there's another lady. She goes, if I've not helped her, I'll give you all your money back. And I haven't looked back. That was almost 3 years ago. And so the coaching, long-winded answer, the coaching I'm doing is really helping leaders and sales teams unlock the power of humility, vulnerability, and curiosity, which I believe are absolute superpowers that many of us let lay dormant.
Humility, vulnerability,
curiosity,
and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So those 3 words, it's interesting that you say those 3 words because those 3 words have come up on this podcast over and over and over again. I was on 2 podcasts back to back and it was yours and another one. I can't remember which person asked me, but somebody asked me what I learned from doing this podcast. And the thing that it probably hit me the most is the importance of humility. And I've had on Navy SEALs, Green Berets, CEOs, heads of HR, a couple hostage negotiators on, like all these different really impressive walks of life. And all of them, without prompting, mentioned humility as one of the key skills, if not the key skill. And vulnerability, I think, is a branch from that. And we've talked a lot on here about curiosity. So yeah, that resonates with me. You wrote the book. It's called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. Why that title? Like, I would love to get a little bit of background into, was that the title that you had when you sat down to write the book and you just wrote it around that? Or was that the title that emerged? Was that always a mantra of yours? Tell me a little bit more about that title. I think there's a lot there that we can unpack.
Mm-hmm. You ever seen Christmas Vacation?
Yes.
Do you remember when Clark sees his tree?
Yes.
And the glow?
Yep.
That's exactly what happened, but I wasn't in the forest. My eyeballs weren't frozen. I was in Dallas. I was traveling. This is when I kind of was the tail end of my production. So I would say right guy, right time, right place. I was a seller at this company. I was a number 1 rep for 10 years straight before I moved into an executive role. And I say that, who cares? That when I left that company, we didn't go out of business. So it's, again, power, humility. They're doing fine. I'm doing fine. But I remember when I was going down to Dallas, training this group of folks who were super competitive. And I was like the big brother. They were trying to make like a younger brother. You want your big brother to give you approval, and they wanted to be liked. And I could see it and I felt it. And I told them, my guys, I expect you to win every deal, but you're not going to win every deal. So go in the mindset you're going to win. More importantly, I expect you to win people. Specifically, how can you win people when we lose a deal? And they looked at me like blank stare. I go, think about it. Imagine we lose a deal to ABC company. We lose a consulting project, and I call that client 2 or 3 weeks from now. And I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, it's Casey with DEF company. I'm calling to follow up to make sure that, 1, thank you for the opportunity to compete recently, but I want to make sure that you got a great service from this other company you hired. I want to make sure that you got a great service for them. The number of people that would say, man, Casey, thanks for your follow-up. I haven't even heard from the company I chose. Or they'd say, man, Casey, actually, the company we hired, they're not doing that good. Are your consultants still available? And I'd pick up like easy deals just by following up with genuine curiosity. And so when I said that, I said, you guys, it's more, we have to win relationships first, not deals. And right when I said that, I was like, that's it. That's the Griswold moment. I said, that's the title of the book, Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. And I knew I didn't want to write the book when I was still at this company called K-Force. I was there forever. And because I would have been a distraction, like, I'll write here, but I got to do a corporate job. So I just waited. I started journaling. I started like doing more like blog posts on LinkedIn. And when I left in March of 2019, I took some time off to get my mind right. And then literally for 4 months from 9 to 11:30, shout out to one of my former clients, Bobby. She told me, writers, you got to write every day. Every day. And some days I thought I was like Beverly Cleary, Stephen King. And there's times that the writing sucked and it was really good. But just the habit of anything, it was a habit of writing. And I literally, in my calendar, 9 to 11:30, and I just wrote. It was a fantastic exercise. I never in my wildest dreams, O'Brien, thought, if you'd have told me when I wrote the book that the book would impact wealth management, insurance, lawyers, software, the golf industry, I'd be like, what? But I'm a staffing consulting guy. How am I going to help them? Well, relationship building is in every industry.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and have this conversation, because I think if people haven't tuned out already, when you said sales coaching, and be like, well, I'm not in sales. I think so much that we think about and talk about when it comes to being a good salesperson applies to every other area of life. And, there's sort of the cliche, well, everybody's a salesperson. And yeah, to some degree, that's true. But I think even more impactful is the principles of sales apply to every relationship that you have. To build a relationship to the point where somebody trusts you enough to give you money to perform some service or for some good. That's the same as building trust in any other capacity in life. And if you want something to go your way, if you want to influence a decision in any aspect of your life, it's the same principles as influencing a sales decision. So I believe very much that the principles apply everywhere, and sales in particular is a discipline worth studying.
Yeah, I think selling's about, I always joke with my clients, like I'll say, guess how many deals I closed in my life? And they're like, geez, I don't know, millions? I go, 0. In theory, my client closed themselves. I asked great questions and I told a story to give them an example that someone's already been through that, or that we've already helped someone. I think selling's about talking in third person, not first person. Meaning many of our clients choose me because of this, this, and this. But if I'm saying, I think I can help you here, and this is what we do, and this is what I do, I'm a little bit on the defensive because I'm getting sold to.
Yeah.
So I think when we ask great questions, and as a seller or a leader, how often, I would challenge people listening right now, is how often are you hearing someone say, God, great question, O'Brien? And when you hear that, do you allow for silence to set in and then to really think about the question you just asked? Or do you ask 2 more questions and they already forgot about that question and you start talking more about yourself?
So one of the questions I was going to ask you is, where do we start when building relationships? And is that the answer? Just start by being curious about the other person?
I think it starts by being prepared. I think it starts by being vulnerable. I think it starts by being like, there's a word behind me people can't see. It's believe. So like I'm a big Ted Lasso fan. We talked about, I believe what I do matters. I think about that word often. So I believe that everybody wants to make friends. I believe that everybody wants to laugh. I believe that everybody wants to connect with people. It's my job as a relationship builder to find what that is and to get them to connect. And so I think just like when you open up a bank account, the first question don't ask the bank teller is, hey, can I have 40 grand? They'll be like, yeah. Do you have 40 grand? No, you're a bank. You have more money than I do. I want it. They'll be like, get out of here, dude. What are you on drugs?
Yeah.
You deposit. So just like a relationship, you deposit, you asking more about them. A great analogy, one of my mentors in life called it the front 9, back 9 example. So those that are golfers out there, this might resonate. The front 9's all about the person you're talking to, the prospect, your friend, your husband, your wife. The back 9, once you've kind of talked a little bit about them, then you can talk about you. And so I kind of, one, I don't overthink it. One, I'm not afraid to ask any question because I know I'm asking it from true belief, a true genuine authenticity. I love connecting with people. The phrase, tell me more, I love saying, because most people, when I ask a question, I say, oh, tell me more about that. They never say, Casey, go F yourself. I don't want to tell you more about me.
Yeah.
They love talking about them.
So when you think about sales, there's the old, well, you got to build rapport. I remember getting coached, well, when you walk into somebody's office, you got to be scoping it out. And if they've got pictures that they went to Michigan State, you got to bring that up somehow and find some connection. And I think it's things like that make sales feel sleazy. How do you think about rapport and about actually building that connection with people? How do you do that? And how do you actually ask the right kinds of questions? Like, what makes a good question?
I would say a TED-based. So tell me, explain, describe is a great question. But can I answer that with a story?
Please.
So when I was an executive at this company, I had 2 people with me going to a meeting with Starbucks. This was back in Seattle. This is like back in 2018. And one of the executives, as I did some research, trying to find commonality or rapport, because I think commonality and rapport leads to a relationship. I saw that this dude, I searched on Facebook, so maybe I call that sleazy. Sorry, I did it. I was just trying to find, I went on LinkedIn and I saw that he went to this high school called Mount Rainier. Well, I said, this is perfect. And my two sellers were like, what the hell does that do with anything? I said, my high school football coach left Mount Rainier in 1992 and went to my high school, Kent Ridge High School. They're like, yeah. I go, he says he plays football. I'm going to ask about that. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We get in the elevator. I can't remember the guy's name now. It's bad, but I go, I see you're a big Ram. He's like, what? I go, Mount Rainier? He's like, what? I go, do you know Marty Osborne? He's like, what? How do you know Coach Osborne? I go, he was my coach. No way. Yeah, Coach Osborne, he's a huge mentor in my life, which is true. I mean, to this day, I'm a huge mentor in my life. I go, tell me about, were you on that state championship team? The next 20 minutes, O'Brien, he literally went down memory lane. On the way back to his desk, we sat down. I asked him more questions. I go, oh, do you know this guy named Dick Fane? Oh, yeah, how do you know him? Do you know Keith Murphy? Oh, yeah, how do you know him? Do you know Brian Cartwright? Oh, yeah, I played with Brian Cartwright at Central. How do you know him? He only told us now that he had 30 minutes to meet. We're 45 minutes into it. My two sellers have not said a thing. And I told them before I go, do not say a thing. But once it's ready, you'll know. It'll be green light. At the 45-minute mark, he's like, dude, this has been so fun. I can't believe it. How do you know, Coach? And please tell him hi for me. And hey, how can I help you guys? What do you need from me? I'm like, well, I'm just, I'm our executive sponsor. I want to introduce our two sellers. They are, building relationships with your organization. I don't know if we have the right context, but I'd love to make sure that we're, introducing ourselves, putting ourselves in position to compete when there's staffing or consulting opportunities come up. Here, I'm going to draw the whole org chart for you right now. We got out and my sellers were like, what the hell just happened? Now, to me, I was being me. Yeah. Now, some people might say, well, why'd you waste his time? What'd you talk about his high school for? That was a risk. It was a calculated risk. And to me, I'd rather be uncommon by trying something that's real connection, real authenticity, showing I did a little bit of homework, showing I was prepared. But we had this fantastic conversation that led to commonality, led to rapport. He felt better about himself. I know he did. And then my two sellers got access to his entire org. Now, maybe that was luck. I don't know. But that was like one of the first stories that popped in my mind when you asked me that question.
Do you have any stories of the opposite of that happening where you go in and you're like, hey, you're a big Ram. And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And you just feel like, yeah, he's not doing it. Cause so I actually have one. A client of mine, similar story, played lacrosse in college for a coach that went on to become my younger brother's lacrosse coach years later at a different school. And we were sitting next to each other and I had brought it up to him once, like via email. And he was like, oh yeah, small world, crazy. And then we were sitting down and I brought it up to him again. And I was kind of asking him about it. And he just looks at me and he goes, I effing hate that guy. And it just shut down the whole conversation. And I realized that he had not enjoyed playing for that particular individual. I think like some people, whether it's you just are barking up the wrong tree or like, you're taking a risk and it doesn't work out, or you get into a business setting and the person's like, yeah, no, we're here to discuss business. Like, yes, I went to that high school, but I don't care. Tell me about yourself. How do you handle that? I think when people think about this stuff, it's like, oh, it's either just the rapport that gets you the deal or I don't know, something like that. It feels like it's a little bit messy. Then how do you bring it back when it doesn't work out? Sorry, that was a convoluted question.
That's all right. No, belief. I believe that I do matter. So I think about that often. I mean, I think part of selling is you got to read the room a little bit. Like as a pilot, if I see a thunderstorm ahead of me, probably don't want to fly into it. If you ask one question, and like if I was you in that one, I would have went back and said, oh, wow, tell me why it wasn't, if you had curiosity, like I had a great experience, but I'd tell me if you're open to it, tell me what was not so good about it, which takes courage of asking a really tough question to a guy that's already pissed. I probably would have done it. Mm-hmm. And if it backfires, then I'm going to quickly, as a quarterback, be audible ready, change the play, get right into more about what we're here for. One of the questions I always like asking people is describe what would be an ideal outcome for you in the time we have today, which I would probably transition right from personal to that question, which gets me the answers to the test of what they want to talk about. But back to your question, has it happened before? I can think of one where I literally was at a large cellular company, starts with the letter A, can't tell it. And I was in Dallas and I remember going to this like meeting. I flew down. It's a big ass conference room. And it was like, again, I hate to quote Christmas Vacation again, but when Clark takes his present to the Frank Shirley at the end, it's like that long table. That's exactly what it was. And this guy makes me wait for 15 minutes, finally comes in, he sits down, he goes, go. I'm like, I look around like, I go, so should we skip the small talk today? I just want to make sure you want to just sprint right into this thing. Smart asked him right back. He just stared at me. And in my mind, I'm like, you're not as cool as you think, dude. And neither am I. And we're human and I'm doing my best. I'm here to help. I'm here to ask some questions. I'm here to learn about your business. I'm here to share some stories of how we've helped others, but we're not curing cancer. I'm not flying airplanes. I'm providing staffing and consulting services, and I'm not going to let you rattle me, bro. That was the self-talk inside my head.
Yeah. So what'd you do?
We talked through. I just started asking questions. I just said, all right, we'll go get right into it. Skip small talk. And then I asked him, can you describe what would be? And I know we scheduled time last week. Before we get started, I want to make sure nothing's changed. So tell me what would be a great outcome for you in the time we have today. And he gave me a few things. I'm like, great. Tell me why that'd be important for you. Kept talking. Perfect. I'd love to ask some more questions. I brought my subject matter expert, technical guy. We started asking questions, told some stories, had a case study ready because we'd practiced, which most sellers don't like to do. They like to wing it, practice on their clients. But to me, I think selling and relationship building, I treat it like a game. Everybody likes to laugh. Like literally, another story. I was at TaylorMade last week. They're a client of mine. Love TaylorMade. Shout out TaylorMade. And we're playing in a golf tournament. There's a dude in the group that's 76 years old. He looked like Santa Claus. No joke. And was totally reserved, like uptight. And I told the guy next to me, I'm like, we're breaking him. I don't know how. We're breaking him. And he, just like you giggled, he giggled. I'm like, just watch. This is on. So I have this crazy thing when we make a birdie in a golf group. You take your hat off and you kind of slowly walk up to the person, slowly walk up, and then you get right in their face, like literally nose to nose, and you shake their hand, and your eye contact is like literally inches away, and you smile. It is so weird and so random, but why it makes people laugh, it does. He's like, what the hell? I go, Dave, that's our handshake. Every time we make a birdie, we're going to make a lot of birdies today, bro. Get ready for it. You ready? And so like a couple next holes, we did it again. I just slow walk. I turn to him. I do it. He's like, Jesus, what the hell's, I go, Dave, get used to it, buddy. It's going to happen all day long. And my buddy Dwayne's like, I don't think this is working. I go, it's working. Just watch. Next thing you know, he makes a birdie, walks up to me in my grill. He's like, this is the best thing ever. I can't wait to take this back to my club. I go, how many clubs do you belong to? 14.
Whoa.
Gazillionaire. Nicest dude ever. But he goes, and like something as stupid as that. It was silly, but I brought out the human side in him.
Yeah.
So.
Have you always been quick on your feet?
I think I'd be lying if I said yes. No, I think it's practice. I think playing quarterback helped me do that. Honestly, I think it was lack of fear of asking questions. I mean, I tell a story in my book that's my wife still says, I cannot believe you wrote that. Why would you embarrass yourself that way? I go, why wouldn't I embarrass myself? If I'm going to be teaching vulnerability and humility, I got to be at the forefront. So, I mean, kind of a buzzkill, but I'll share the story anyways. In 8th grade, so I'm almost 48 years old. That's a long time ago. We're part of this group called being a natural helper. And which is a natural helpers organization where like you got picked by your peers to go help and kind of like be there to help ask questions and be a friend and do all these things. We had this like retreat, and they were talking about the concerns and the dangers of teen sex. Teen. Now, in what I heard was him saying team with an M. As an 8th grade boy going through puberty, I'm like, oh my God, he's talking about team sex. This is what the hell? No, I'm in my mind.
This is a new term to me.
I'm laughing hysterically in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to be mature. And the questions are going, my brain's turning. I'm like, you got to ask. I'm like, why team sex? I'm like, why isn't that laughing? This is unbelievable. What kind of class is this? And so finally I raised my hand. I go, hey, Mr. Armstrong, question, is team sex kind of like an orgy? And he goes, what did you just say? I go, well, Mr. I'm sorry. I don't know why you're mad. You keep talking about team sex. I'm really confused. I'm sorry. He's like, oh my God, Casey. teen with an N. The whole 200 people in the room erupted.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I can only imagine.
8th grade boy. I mean, I think of freshman year in college.
Voice cracking as you ask it.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Freshman year in college, I took an anthropology class, 3 level class. We're watching these freaking, tribal dudes. They got just a little skirt on, shirt off, and they're walking 20 miles out to kill their whatever they kill. They bury it in the desert, these trees. They walk 20 miles back, grab the family. And the first question I thought is, how the hell, they don't have Apple Maps. How do they remember where they buried this thing? So I asked the question in front of 300 people. Hey, Mr. Blah, blah, blah. I'm curious. How do these tribal folks, how do they remember where they buried their food? Pause. He looks at me, he goes, do you ever forget where Safeway is? Which is like a grocery store in New York. Whole place laughs at my expense. I'm like, what an a-hole. But to me, it's like asking those questions. Hopefully I inspire someone else in that group to say, well, if he can ask a question like that, why can't I?
Yeah. Speaking of team sex, have you ever read the book Getting Naked?
Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic business fable. My very first wealth management firm I worked with told me, he goes, Jacox, this book reminds me of you, talking about humility and vulnerability.
Yeah.
I related to that sales guy, that's character so well. Yeah. Love that book.
And it's just the one thing that just continues to stick with me from that book. There's a bunch of great stuff in that book, but the thing that sticks with me from that book is just being willing to ask the question, because odds are if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it, and you're actually doing a favor to the room or to at least one other person by asking the stupid question.
Love it. Couldn't agree more.
It's hard to do in a business setting at first because we feel like we have to be the expert and we feel like we have to know, and to show that vulnerability is a weakness, but it's not. It's just a sign of intelligence. I think it's a sign of curiosity and drive that I want to know the answer to that. And I want to figure this out. Okay. Yep. Got it. Clocked it. Now we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
Asking what an acronym means. I love the story in that where there's the woman at the table, they're meeting with the 49ers, and one of the women asks who Jerry Rice is. And sure enough, there was another woman at the table who didn't know either. And they realized that if they were going to go out with this marketing campaign, they were going to miss a huge audience who weren't football fans, and they needed to find a way to relate to women. So yeah, just always be willing to ask the stupid question, I think is great advice. What advice do you have for people who want to get better at thinking on their feet?
I would encourage them to practice.
And what does that look like?
Whatever they do. When I say practice, most sales teams or salespeople role play, got to get nervous. But if we can create cultures where leader walks down the hall or seller walks down the hall or someone walks down the hall and says, ABC Insurance, yeah, you guys' rates are too high. Tell them what you're going to say. Or you guys do A, D, E, and F. What are you going to No, we don't. What are you going to say? So I think it's practicing the ability to not defend, but practicing the ability to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing asking, maybe a leader might say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Sales rep or leader on your team, tell me what are 2 or 3 things that give you anxiety and why? If someone asked you this question, you'd be like, what do I say? And then you're getting kind of the answers that you can kind of practice those types of things. I just think practice is a very underrated skill in any profession, specifically the sales profession. Pilots have to practice. Baseball teams, they practice. Golfers, they practice. Football teams, they practice. Pilots, they practice. Doctors practice. Yet sales team, we can just wing it and practice on each other, practice on our clients.
Yeah.
Not very nice.
Yeah, I think that's true in so many capacities. I interviewed a gentleman, Mike Sorelli, who was a Navy SEAL back one of the first episodes. I think he was episode 11.
Oh, wow.
And he was saying he'd been in the military, started in the Marines for 20 years, and he had deployed for 48 months. And so he had been in the Army for 20 years, and he had only been in combat for 4 years. He said the rest of the time was all practice and preparation. And what he saw as he was moving into the corporate world was we had the percentages skewed the wrong way, that we were in the game 98, 99% of the time and only practicing a very, very small amount. And he was saying, you can't get better. You can't be at your best. You can't be your sharpest if you're not practicing and honing your saw all the time.
Well, I think it goes back to humility and vulnerability. That's a great lead in back to what we talked about at the beginning. So how many people listening at home go to their peers, go to their team, go to their wife, husband, their boss, and they say, hey, tell me 2 things you love that I'm doing, and tell me 2 things that I could work out to be a better leader, better at my job, a better employee, and be truly open to what they might say. Maybe we ask our clients that. How many people are asking, even when you win a deal, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, thanks so much I'm glad we were able to help you. But out of curiosity, tell me 2 things I could have done differently or better to make the experience even better for you.
Mm-hmm.
Uncommon.
There's a 4th piece that you keep touching on, but you've not named directly, which is having a growth mindset. What you are saying is great, provided somebody is willing to honestly sit there and try to get better. And I think all of this stuff, like, I think the reason that a lot of sales trainings feel icky to people is because they assume or they see examples of people taking the practice and using it without the right intention. They're using it with the wrong mindset. And I think if you come into any interaction with a growth mindset, you are willing to take a hard look in the mirror, to be vulnerable, to be curious, to be humble, and to recognize that there are opportunities to get better. And I think that plays a big role in anybody that's trying to level up in anything that they're doing. You have to be willing to take that hard look in the mirror.
Yeah. And that requires grace. I think it requires honesty. It requires realizing that we're all flawed. Every single one of us. I have yet to meet the perfect person. And I think when you start the day with realizing that you have gaps, it's okay not to know everything, but let's go do something to try to fix them our best. We all get 1,440 minutes a day. No one gets more, no one gets less. I'm going to do everything I can to maximize mine, and then go night-night, bedtime. I'll wake up next morning, do my best to start over, do it again. In this culture of social media where it's easy to compare, I heard, I think it was Joe Montana. His dad asked him, he said, do you want to be the best or do you want to be your best? And to me, it's an easy answer. I want to be my best. That's all I can do, because my best might not be as good as your best, Brian. Doesn't mean I'm not going to have big goals. Doesn't mean I'm going to push myself. But if I know that I'm going to be my best and truly honest with myself, and if I didn't, that's okay, but don't let it happen 2 days in a row.
Yeah. I love that. Want to move back to the relationship piece of this, because all this stuff is great as we think about building relationships. How long does it take to build relationships?
I mean, that's a tough question, because each person's different. It could be 2 minutes. I write a story in my book where it took me 5 years to build a relationship with somebody. I think relationships all about dad joke coming. I always relate, like, the best relationship builders are like great custodians. They all have keys. And if we use the right key to unlock the right door, will lead to the right relationship. And so sometimes you meet people where they are, they need it right now. Sometimes you might have to follow up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And every time you follow up with them, are you referencing something that you heard about them from before? This is where, as a seller, I love documenting. Documentation made me look way smarter than I am.
Yeah. Amen.
It's like they're giving
I have a terrible memory. So documentation is critical.
Yeah. And it's like they're giving you all the answers. Just bring it up next time we talk. Hey, last time we spoke, you're getting ready to go to your daughter's basketball game in Chicago. How'd it go? Like, if you remember what they said, they did it for a reason. Or if you see something on social media that are on LinkedIn, leave a comment, ask a question, share one of their posts with somebody. Hey, I really like what O'Brien said about this. Great information for people out there. Like, each relationship's different and unique. So I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer. That one. Yeah.
It's funny because I was giving that same advice to somebody the other day who's a new salesperson in our organization. And we were talking about when I was doing a lot of cold calling, because that's what she's going to be doing now. And I said, a cold call is like, it's in the name. It's as cold as the relationship can get. And oftentimes it took me several conversations with a person before they would accept a meeting with me, if they did at all. But every time I would try to just learn something. So the next time I called, I could call back and say, hey, last time you were working through this, how did it go? Hey, last time you were thinking about this, have you started that yet? I also have kind of a unique name, so it's a little bit of a cheat code, but they would remember my name. I would remember something about our conversation, and it just shows to them that even though they don't have a lot of memories with me, it shows that we have had interactions and I am paying attention and I'm curious and I'm listening. And eventually it would soften people enough. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it works beyond sales too, to be remembering what the past conversations were, checking in on somebody's family, a personal thing, or checking in on something business related. It just shows that you are caring and paying attention.
Well, and even another layer to that, because I believe every word we say matters. So imagine if I said, because like one thing would be, hey, I'm just, how are things going since we last talked? How's your daughter? Versus, hey, Brian, it's Casey with ABC Company. I wanted to follow up for our last conversation we had on September 15th. You told me to call you on November 22nd. Is now a good time? Mm-hmm. Like just that specifics, like, Jesus, we did talk? They probably didn't remember.
Yeah.
Like that's a gap that most sellers make. They meet with somebody, they talk with them. Oh, they love me. No, they were nice to you.
Amen.
Doesn't mean they love you. And doesn't mean if I killed it. I told them all about the PowerPoint. Well, what'd you learn about them? Right. So it's like slowing down to like do those little specific things or where tie that back to the follow up with the specifics of it. I mean, I'm sure you can probably relate to this. When your years of selling, some of my best relationships, the first 20 minutes were never about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out Chris Barch, my buddy of mine at AT&T forever. We talked about North Dakota State football every single time. This other lady, Claire, we talked about Seattle sports every time. I knew it was important to her. And I learned the hard way because the meeting went long because she wanted to talk about things she wanted to talk about. It had nothing to do with what I want to talk about, but I was meeting her where she was at, earning the right to be able to talk about what I want to talk about.
So what do you say to people who feel like that's forced, right? Like, oh, you're just manipulating the situation by doing that versus building real relationships? Because I remember feeling when I was a young salesperson, I remember hearing a story about an older gentleman that I worked with, and he spent Christmas Eve with his largest client. And I remember judging that as like, I would never want to spend Christmas Eve with my clients. That, that's work. And I don't want to work that hard. And over time, I've changed that mindset. But I would just be curious how you think about relationships and would respond to somebody like me who was feeling that in the moment.
I would say I can't control how you think. I can tell you how I go about life is I make friends for a living. I told my son that when he was 7 years old. I wrote about it in the book. To me, it's only forced if it's choppy. It's not authentic. It's not genuine. Like if I wing it, hey, Brian, how things going? How's your daughter? I don't have a daughter. Oh, sorry. Hey, how the Eagles doing? I live in Chicago, a Bears fan. Oh, sorry. To me, if it's genuine, if I focus on tone, I focus on eye contact, I focus on body language, I focus on things I have control over. I can't control if you think it's forced or not. I know I believe what I do matters. It's never forced. I just try to simplify it and knowing I can't control what you think. All I can control is how I show up, how genuine I'm being, because I want to know. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that was like, that's what I feel.
No, I'd keep it genuine. I think that's great. And that's what I came to realize about them is they had become friends. It didn't matter. I mean, it didn't hurt that he was his largest client, but it also didn't necessarily matter. Right. And they had become friends, and friends can spend the holidays together. I had a coworker during COVID who has young kids about the same age that my kids are. And we both have family out of town, and we both couldn't get out of town for Thanksgiving. And so we did Thanksgiving together one year. We had a great time. And, it was a coworker. It was a work relationship, but it was a relationship that has developed into a really nice friendship. I met another guy who started at work, and fast forward, he and I are very close. I officiated his wedding. My wife introduced him to his wife. It's like we hang out together all the time and have been in all these trips and had all these rich experiences together. And so I think the more I view it all as integrated, as just relationships in my life, as just adding value in any way that relationships add value, whether it's financial or not, the more fun it becomes.
Totally. And I think it's, as sellers, self-talk matters. The stories we tell ourselves matters. And so we tell our story of like, they're going to judge me, or this is that, or like, well, you're going to start to believe it. I mean, I think sometimes it takes risks to do some of these things. Like I was recently traveling, client I was supposed to hang out with on Friday. He said, some health stuff come down. I'm sorry, I wasn't able to do it. I'm like, okay, what do? Do I leave it alone? Or am I genuinely curious? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Is everything okay? Didn't respond. 2 days later, hey man, sorry to text you all the weekend, but I'm really concerned about you, care about you, thinking about you. I hope all's well. Casey, thanks for following up. I'm in the ICU. I'll be in touch. Oh my God. And now I spent a week with this guy in Alaska. So maybe that kind of earned me some street cred with him. But genuine follow up. Later that night, like 9:50, I get a text from his wife. Hey, Casey, I want to give you an update on how this person's doing. He cares about you. Now, I went and texted back and forth with the wife. Now, what this guy's going through, I know somebody that went through it, and I'm a connector at heart. It fills my tank, O'Brien. So I said, I got to connect her to this person. So I said, hey, person, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm thinking about you. Call it serendipity. I know somebody who went through this and they beat it. I would love to connect with them if you're open to it, just to give you someone to have some strength and connection. Oh my God, I'd love that. Thank you. Now, I don't get anything from that. I don't get paid that, but I get karma and my heart's full.
Yeah.
And that having a full heart is better than a full bank account.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a broader conversation there around mental health too, right? Like creating community like that and really caring for and taking care of others like that. I mean, that's what makes us feel good in life in general. And I think a lot of us, one of the questions I was going to ask you is what you think about hustle culture. And so be curious your answer to that. But I'll just say, I think there is a spot where we do have to slow down and really the more we slow down and be connected to each other, the better we feel, not just the more money we make winning deals or whatever, but we do feel better, and you can't understate how important that is. But how do you feel about like the hustle culture and the impact that has had? Do you think that's a good thing, that everybody's out there working hard, trying to be better? Or do you think there's a shadow side to it?
I mean, I think it's a recipe for burnout. Now, I know the fact that when I was in corporate, I grinded. But when kids came, I remember when my son was a year and a half, maybe a year, we were very structured with bedtime. He was going to bed at 7:00. I was getting home at 6:45. I was a top guy in this company. My company loved it. Life's great. I was making money. Their company's making money. But deep down, I was miserable. Miserable because I'm like, this is not what a dad does. Dad doesn't spend 15 minutes with his kid. And I remember going to my boss. I remember her name's Angela. I said, Ange, I don't know what the answer is, but I'm feeling really, really shitty. Pardon my Francais. And I said, I need help. She's like, what's going on? I said, I'm not getting time with my son. And I remember I said, I got to figure something out. She goes, why don't you leave at 4 every day? I go, this isn't a bank, Ange. I can't leave at 4. We don't. She's like, are you that important? I'm like, no, I didn't say that. I said, well, do you not trust your team? I said, no, I didn't say that. Why can't you leave at 4? If you're available via phone the whole way home, I go take 2 hours, spend time with your family, spend time with your son, have dinner. I trust that you're going to get online later and you're going to do what you got to do. And so it was kind of like the hustle culture was still there. I just had a leader that helped me have balance with time and with being a dad. And so once I did that, O'Brien, my career went to another level because I was the best version of me at home. I was the best version of me at work. Now, it wasn't perfect. There was days where I, got out of whack again. But I think that the hustle culture is one that I think it's good to compete. It's good to do your best. But I think it's also making sure there's other things in life that are important and to give yourself the grace to go do that. And the more that you can communicate that with your team, with your leader on the why, and hopefully there's leaders out here that are celebrating those things. Shout out to Angela Aronica did back in 2006. I'm forever grateful for that.
So that segues into another question I had for you, which you talk about winning the relationship, not the deal. But yet if we are a salesperson, you have to win some deals or you don't keep your job. And so there's pressure. There's a clock that's ticking. My brother is in tech sales, and it just blows my mind in that sector how fast they want performance. I've seen it at a bunch of different companies where a new salesperson will come in and they'll have some quarterly goal for their first quarter with the company that is almost their full goal, the same as a full goal for somebody who's been there for years. And so there is this pressure to jump into a situation where there's some success metric, whether it's sales or otherwise, and drive hard for that thing. When a lot of what you're saying is, hey, take the time to build the relationships. Hey, make sure you have some balance and are healthy and can perform at your best. How do you balance those two? Or how do you coach people to balance those two desires or feelings?
Mm-hmm. I think it's an intense amount of clarity. I love asking salespeople, tell me a time, or a sales leader, tell me a time where you actually told a client, no, we're not the right one to help. And that's where, again, we're kind of the mindset of win the relationship, not the deal. I give multiple examples in the book of where I said no. And the client was like, wait, what? I go, it's not worth it your business is more important for me to do it the right way. And I don't think the time frame that you need us to get this done by, we're going to fail. And I don't want to be the guy that when you go to this conference, you're like, hey, why did this project fail? Guy Jacox at the ABC give him a call. He's a great dude. So I think of course we all want to grow. We want to get better. We want to close more deals, but I think you have to do it the right way. And as a leader, instead of telling your sales team what the right deal, what the wrong deal is, maybe ask them questions. Tell me what a great deal looks like. As a leader, do we understand to go to your team and we say, do you understand the problems that exist for our industry? Do you understand the problems we solve for industry? Do you know how we solve those problems differently and better than our competition? Do you know how to tell the story of proof? Like, are we arming our sellers or our team with messaging to go there? Do we have a sales process? Do we have a way to measure the health of a pipeline? I think that goes into growth because too many sellers fail when they don't spend time on the right deals. They spend time on the wrong deals and then they get into convince mode, which is what every other salesperson does. But if we're asking the right questions, because I believe every deal is won or lost in discovery, right? And we have clear metrics of how we're going to go about doing it. I follow something called MEDDIC, but then at least it allows us to get there. So, and I think sometimes leaders, we have to ask ourselves, like, you want someone to do X. Like I remember when I was in staffing business, one of my leaders was like, hey, we don't have enough market share. Okay. Tell me why. Where's that coming from? Well, because I interviewed somebody and I think we're missing out. Okay. Well, tell me what you think we do. Well, we do this and that. Okay. Of our market share at this other account, 800 consultants are offshore. We don't do offshore. So that market share is gone. So let's subtract 800 from this. Now our new market share is this. Tell me where else we can do it. Well, and so I think sometimes I had to peel back the onion and ask more questions of my leaders so that kind of remind them that, hey, wait a minute. No, we're doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. Where we get lost in perception. And perception leads, our perception is our reality. So I don't know if those stories or kind of thoughts help answer your question, but those are the couple of things that really came to mind when you're asking me that.
The one thing I want to loop back to is you said you have to get a whole lot of clarity. And you seem like a guy who has a lot of clarity. I help my clients do 3 things: humility, vulnerability, curiosity. You talked about some frameworks that you use. It's TED. Boom, boom, boom. What is your process for gaining clarity for yourself? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. And we think we know what we want. We think we know the answer, but we're not really clear when it comes to having to verbalize it. So what was your process, or what is your process for gaining clarity on things in your life?
I don't know if I was going to answer it, but this is what's on my heart. 2 things. I do a gratitude journal every morning. That helps me get clarity and reminds me of things. I got a lot of good things in my life. I got 2 healthy kids. I got a fantastic wife. I have a new puppy. Shout out to Harley. I have the ability to go play golf. I have the ability to work out. I focus on that. Another way that helps me get clarity is, one of my friends, Colin Henderson, shout out to Colin. He taught me this 4-minute meditation called HA. Stands for HAW. It's a 4-minute meditation where I literally go outside. I set my timer. I don't do it all the time still, but I do it. I still do it consistently, but I find I do it when I'm anxious for whatever reason. And I literally will set the timer for a minute. I just walk, or I go outside by myself and I just breathe for that first minute. Deep, deep breaths. Then the second minute, I say to myself out loud, I have statements. These are physical, emotional, or opportunistic things. I have health. I have an amazing wife. I have the chance to do amazing things today. I'm affirmations. I'm putting stuff out in the universe. Third minute is I am statements. Again, physical, emotional, or opportunistic. I am a great dad. I'm a patient dad. I'm a great relationship builder. I'm going to ask great questions today. And then the last minute is I will put it into action. So for me, I don't know why it works, O'Brien, but something in my brain triggers something where I get clarity about, okay, I'm good. I'm going to figure this out. I think for me, I remove what I call my swear words that create anxiety for me, which is when I say the phrase, man, I need to do this. I should do this. I want to do this. I have to do this. I know I can't do that. Instead, I replace them with I will, and I write it down. Like when I do my task list on Google, when my email's up, every one of my task lists is I will introduce Dale and Tori. I will update my podcast by this date. I will. And so it just creates action that gives me the clarity that I'm moving something forward. Because I think sometimes as a seller or a leader, it's tough to measure success. Like if I mow the lawn, it's shorter. I raked the bunker. Hey, the sand looks better. Swept the floor. That stuff's gone. Vacuumed the floor. Dirt's gone. But I think for me, these are the ways I measure clarity smallly. Just reminding myself, giving myself grace that there's always something to be positive for in life. If you're honest with yourself, something is going well. It might not be the most obvious, but I think back to you said growth mindset. I love the book by Carol Dweck about mindset. And I'm honest with myself that no one is always in growth mindset. We're flawed humans, but I have the tools to get back into a growth mindset quickly when I find myself out. And usually what I do, I lean back in on the humility and vulnerability. I ask for help. It's my wife. Hey man, I'm not my best. Something's not right. So what am I doing wrong? Help me out. And that usually helps me get back to clarity of.
I love that. It seems too, as you were answering that, I was thinking, there's also a lot of clarity that comes with the practice that you were talking about earlier. That honing your practice also is honing your thinking and honing your messaging. And so I would imagine that you gain a lot of clarity from the practice that you do.
I love practice. Not only do I love practice, I love proving to my kids that I practice. Like if I'm speaking at a sales kickoff or a leadership event, I will purposely say, hey, Ryder, hey, Riley, guys, I'm going to go practice for my speech. I'll be right back. Now, that's a little bit of gamesmanship on my part, but I'm proving them so my son's a golfer, my daughter's a big hooper. Luckily they are very driven kids that I think through hard work my wife and I did, but let's say they weren't. I say, hey guys, tell me what's changed. What are you talking about? Well, you told me you want to be on the varsity team. I haven't seen you shoot free throws today. I was curious if something changed. Oh, all right, Dad, I'm going to go shoot. So for me, it's like, guys, if I expect to give a great presentation, I got to go practice my craft. The same things I'm asking you to do, I'm asking of myself. And if you don't think I'm practicing, call me out. Like, here's a perfect example, Brian. Last night, my daughter called me out. She's in driver's ed right now. Driving home from hoop. And she usually drives home, but I was trying to get home because we had this little dinner going. I drove and I did not signal into this lane. Dad, you didn't signal. You're right. Thanks for coaching me, hon. That's on me. That's my bad. I'll do a better job leading, for example. And I was like, what a great call out. She called me out. Yeah. But I could have said, hey, beat it. Shut it.
Yeah.
But I said, hey, great point. Well, thanks for coaching me, honey. Small example of just teaching that mindset to my kids about there are always ways to find ways to get better.
Yeah. I've been called out by my 4-year-old a few times. That's an interesting one. You're like, ooh, yeah, that doesn't feel good, but you're right. Casey, this has been a fantastic conversation and we have covered a ton. And I feel like you have hit so many different things and so many great questions to use. There's so much that people can go back to and just literally rip from this and put into practice. Speaking of practice again, and start using. Is there anything else that is on your mind that you want to share before we wrap this up?
Sure. The one thing I love sharing is one of the best pieces of advice I got right out of college. And when I first heard this piece of advice, I didn't really understand it. And my boss asked, he goes, Casey, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you want to be right or do you want to get what you want? Mm-hmm. I go, I want both. He goes, you can't. You got to pick one. I'm like, okay, shoot. I want to get what I want. He's like, good answer. If you want to be right, that means you got an ego. It's going to block you. You're going to focus on doing what's best for you. Getting what you want is you might eventually be right, but getting what you want is an outcome that everybody wins, or there's a better outcome, better solution for the team, your customer, your marriage, It's kind of learning to give and get. And so that was a question I used to ask salespeople when I would hire people out of the gate. I'm like, hey, before we get started, man, tell me, if someone said, you want to be right, you want to get what you want, what would you say? Like, what? And quickly, it just caught people off guard, but I quickly knew if they were wanting to be right, might not be the best culture fit for us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a great piece of advice. I use it often. It's a piece of advice that I hate, sarcastically, because usually when I hate it, I need it more than ever when my ego is getting in the way. So I love sharing that piece of advice because it made an impact on my life, and I love sharing with others.
Wonderful. I love it. Casey, appreciate you coming on the show. This has been fantastic. Encourage anybody who is listening to go out, check out his book, Win the Relationship, Not the Deal. Check out the Quarterback DadCast podcast. You might hear a familiar voice on there. And check him out on LinkedIn, anywhere else. Casey, thank you.
You bet, man. Appreciate the time to join you, and I really enjoyed the question. You do a great job.
Thank you. Always enjoy talking with you.
Hey folks, one last thing before you go. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit subscribe so you can stay up to date with future guests. That's it. Thanks for coming. Go make the most of your business and the people in it.